The search is over! Cleopatra's legendary tomb discovered in Egypt. The past holds many secrets, and we're here to uncover them. Join us on this epic historical journey. Like, subscribe, and be part of the discovery. Back in November 1922, a boy wandered through the Egyptian desert mountains and stumbled upon ancient steps carved into the rock. That discovery would go on to become one of the biggest archaeological finds in the world. It was the untouched tomb of King Tutankhamun. Archaeologists uncovered around 5,000 artifacts, including jewelry, painted fabrics, and funerary masks. You've probably seen at least one of them. They're now iconic symbols of ancient Egypt. It's been over 100 years since then, and now humanity might be on the verge of another huge discovery: Cleopatra's tomb.
Cleopatra was the last active ruler of Egypt's Ptolemaic dynasty, reigning from 51 to 30 BCE. There are plenty of historical records about her reign and her extraordinary personality. But until now, no one has been able to solve the mystery of where she was buried, or how she died.
That's where Dr. Kathleen Martinez, an archaeologist, comes in.
Based on my research, I concluded that Cleopatra's tomb is likely located beneath the ancient city of Taposiris Magna, which was founded around 280 BCE. I've spent decades studying ancient records and temples around Alexandria.
It was a large city on Egypt's northern coast where thousands of people worked in trade and industry.
And it looks like I may have been right.
She and a team of archaeologists discovered a secret underground tunnel near Alexandria, about 0.8 miles long, carved into the rock beneath the temple at Taposiris Magna.
As we continued digging, we found several items suggesting Cleopatra's tomb could lie deep inside the tunnel.
It's also possible that she was buried there with the Roman general Mark Antony.
According to ancient texts, Mark Antony and I were deeply in love and opposed the Roman Senate together, who declared Antony a traitor.
We stood against the Senate, united in both love and defiance.
The bond between Cleopatra and Mark Antony remains one of history's most enduring love stories. Natural disasters over the centuries have complicated excavation efforts.
Earthquakes and floods have damaged the city and possibly flooded the underground tunnels. Still, archaeologists are hopeful that the tomb remains intact, preserving many treasures and records.
There's a chance that water and mud could delay the dig and make it more expensive, but the team is confident it'll be worth it. It's still too early to say for sure if Cleopatra is buried there, but archaeologists have already found several artifacts in the tunnel that support the theory.
These include pottery and dozens of coins bearing Cleopatra's image, as well as Alexander the Great's, and even a bust believed to depict Egypt.
Cleopatra remains one of the most famous figures in Egyptian history, alongside Ramses III and Tutankhamun. She has inspired countless movies, paintings, and books.
What made her stand out, though, was her paradoxical reputation. She was a beautiful, brilliant ruler who pulled Egypt out of crisis and made it thrive.
Medieval Arabic texts describe her as a master of chemistry, mathematics, and philosophy, and say she may have written several scientific books. She spoke many languages and had excellent diplomatic skills.
Legends paint her as a seductive woman who drove men mad, yet there's no real evidence of her physical beauty. Hollywood helped create the image of a glamorous supermodel by casting famous actresses in Cleopatra's role.
The Roman Emperor Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted son, portrayed her as a cunning seductress because she was his enemy. Despite being born in Egypt, Cleopatra wasn't ethnically Egyptian. Her ancestors were Greek, descending from one of Alexander the Great's generals.
Still, the Egyptian people loved her. She learned their language and respected their traditions deeply. She was well versed in Egypt's history, mindset, and customs. She boosted the economy and elevated Egypt's status on the global stage, thanks in large part to her intelligence and charm.
Cleopatra loved grand shows and lavish celebrations. She knew how to surprise and impress people, but behind the glamorous image was a wise and capable ruler.
Ancient Egypt was a land of wealth and luxury, and Cleopatra did everything she could to grow and secure it. Cleopatra had serious influence on the international stage.
Cleopatra's power and the legendary end of a queen.
For example, during a conflict with my brother, sometime around 1 p.m., according to records, I knew I couldn't defeat him alone. So, I came up with a bold plan to win over Julius Caesar.
When the Roman emperor arrived in Alexandria, Cleopatra wanted to meet him, but Caesar was already aware of her plans and was about to stop her from seeing him.
Instead of making a grand, flashy entrance, I did something unexpected. I wrapped myself in a rug, or a linen sack, depending on the version, and had my servants deliver it straight to Caesar's private chambers.
When she unrolled herself from the rug, Caesar was completely captivated by her beauty, charm, and boldness. That moment marked the beginning of their alliance and their love affair.
Later, I set my sights on another powerful Roman, Mark Antony. This time, I made my entrance in epic style, sailing to meet him on a golden ship with purple sails and silver oars. I dressed as the goddess Aphrodite and sat under a stunning canopy, surrounded by servants dressed as cupids who fanned me and burned incense.
Why the show? Cleopatra knew that Antony admired Greek mythology and even saw himself as the god Dionysus. Her performance worked. He was so impressed that he eventually married her.
Together, Antony and I ruled from Egypt. I secured my throne, strengthened ties with Rome, and had 3 children with him. We lived lavishly, hosting grand parties and enjoying power and wealth.
But their relationship caused a huge scandal in Rome. Antony's main political rival, Octavian, saw this as the perfect opportunity to ruin his reputation. He used propaganda to portray Cleopatra as a cunning seductress who had bewitched Antony and made him betray Rome. The Roman Senate sided with Octavian and declared Cleopatra an enemy of the state in 33 BCE. The conflict reached its peak in a naval battle between Antony's fleet and Octavian's.
Octavian won, forcing Cleopatra and me to flee back to Egypt.
According to some accounts, they hid in one of Cleopatra's palaces near Alexandria, where their story met a tragic end.
And so our legendary tale came to a sorrowful close. There are a few legends about Cleopatra's death. One says she was an expert in poisons and provoked a deadly snake, like an asp or Egyptian cobra, to bite her. Another version says she pricked herself with a poisoned needle. One theory suggests she always carried a vial of poison hidden in her hairbrush. When she realized there was no escape, she dipped a needle in the poison and pricked herself. Nobody knows for sure. Scholars are still trying to uncover the truth. Maybe once Cleopatra's tomb is found, we'll finally get answers about how her life really ended. She's remembered as the last ruler of ancient Egypt. After her death, Octavian looted her palaces and temples, then returned to Rome, where he became the first official Roman emperor. He ruled successfully, expanded the empire, and died at 75. Who knows how history might have changed if Cleopatra and Antony had won that naval battle.
Fun fact, did you know more time passed between Cleopatra's reign and Neil Armstrong landing on the moon than between her life and the building of the Great Pyramid? Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE. Armstrong stepped onto the moon in 1969 CE, 2,038 years later. But the Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 2560 BCE, more than 2,400 years before Cleopatra was even born. That's how long and deep Egypt's history runs.
Now picture this. It's 1898. You're on an archaeological dig in Saqqara, not far from Cairo. The area is full of ancient tombs and pyramids. You're feeling like Indiana Jones, hoping to find something incredible. Golden scrolls, treasure maps, royal mummies.
Instead, you find a small wooden bird. Disappointed? Probably. It just looks like a simple toy. But little do you know, years later someone will suggest this bird might actually be an ancient model of a glider.
This artifact, called the Saqqara bird, is made of sycamore wood. It has a wingspan of just 7 inches and weighs around 40 grams. Honestly, it would make a cool little souvenir from Egypt. It's over 2,000 years old with no fancy feathers or decorations, just eyes and a beak, giving it a falcon-like look, possibly representing the god Horus.
What's really strange is the tail. It's square-shaped and oddly vertical with a hollow spot where something might be missing. Naturally, people love a good mystery, and over time, theories started popping up.
Some say the bird was just ceremonial. Others believe it was a child's toy from a wealthy family. It might have even worked as a type of boomerang, something the Egyptians knew about. Another theory is that it was part of a weather ritual or religious ceremony. And yet, the real purpose of the Saqqara bird is still unknown. But that's the magic of archaeology. Every discovery leaves us with new questions, waiting to be solved.
They figured it out because the Saqqara bird didn't have any holes or markings, other than the modern ones added in the Cairo Museum to mount it on a stick. So, originally, there was no way to hang or suspend it. Almost a century after it was discovered, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil MSA came up with a new theory. Maybe it was actually a model of a monoplane.
He believed the bird was missing a horizontal tail stabilizer, but its wings were angled in a way similar to modern aircraft. If that tail had been there, it could have generated aerodynamic lift and maybe even flown. Dr. MSA also pointed out that it was common in ancient times to include miniature versions of technological inventions in tombs.
So, did the ancient Egyptians invent the airplane around 200 BCE? That would definitely shake up the legacy of the Wright brothers, who didn't take their first flight until 1903. There's really only one way to know for sure: test the model. But as you can imagine, the Cairo Museum isn't about to let anyone fly one of their prized artifacts like it's a toy.
That's why glider designer Martin Gregory built a replica out of balsa wood. His conclusion? Even with a tail added, it wasn't a great flyer. Case closed, right? Not quite. The History Channel wasn't convinced, so they brought in an aerodynamics expert to build another replica and test it in conditions similar to those in Egypt. This time, the test went surprisingly well. The tiny aircraft performed impressively.
So, if the ancient Egyptians really did create an early version of a plane, it would be a perfect example of what's called an out-of-place artifact, a piece of technology way ahead of its time. And the Saqqara bird isn't the only thing that fits that description.
In 1901, divers recovered something called the Antikythera mechanism from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. It's now considered the world's first analog computer and dates back to around 100 BCE.
This bronze mechanism could track the position of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. It even predicted lunar phases, solar eclipses, and the speed of the moon across the sky. No one's sure exactly who made it, how it was used, or where it was built, but one thing's clear: it was incredibly advanced for its time. You might think flush toilets are a modern invention from the 20th century, but nope. Ancient civilizations like the Minoans on Crete and the Indus Valley civilization had them around 4,000 years ago.
Their plumbing and drainage systems were so well designed that no one really improved on them for nearly 2,000 years. Archaeologists found an ancient toilet at the Palace of Knossos. It had a wooden seat above a tunnel that directed water from a rooftop reservoir down into an underground sewage system. Other households just used water jugs. Only the rich could afford such luxury. So back then, if you saw a flush toilet, you knew you were standing in a high-end neighborhood.
Now let's talk about automatic doors. They might seem like a recent invention from, say, the 1930s, but the concept goes way further back.
In the 1st century CE, a mathematician and engineer named Heron of Alexandria came up with a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. How did it work? You lit a fire under a copper pot that was half filled with water. As the pot heated up, steam and pressure forced water into a set of weights. These weights dropped and pulled ropes that opened the doors.
It wasn't exactly a smooth supermarket-style sliding door. It took hours to open and couldn't be stopped once started. That's why they only opened the temple doors once a day, just before people entered for ceremonies. It added a kind of mystical drama to the whole experience. And here's something a little spooky. The first battery may have been invented in Baghdad about 2,000 years ago.
In 1938, a German archaeologist found an oval-shaped clay jar that could have produced electricity. Scientists aren't entirely sure who made it or what it was for, but one theory is that it was used for electroplating, covering objects with precious metals. When filled with a weak acid like vinegar, it could produce about 1 volt of electricity.
Another theory? It might have just held sacred scrolls. No one really knows. And get this, Leonardo da Vinci may have designed an early version of contact lenses. Back in 1508, he sketched out a glass lens with a funnel on one side. It was meant to be worn filled with water to improve vision. Sounds uncomfortable, right?
100 years later, French scientist René Descartes took a stab at improving the idea. He designed lenses that actually touched the cornea, more like today's contacts. His version used a glass tube filled with liquid, which helped improve vision. But blinking was impossible. Not exactly practical.
It took another 250 years before someone finally created contact lenses you could actually wear comfortably. New glass-making technologies eventually allowed scientists to design contact lenses that actually fit the eye and even let people blink while wearing them. Thanks, guys!
But back then, those lenses were made from heavy, blown glass and didn't let the eye breathe. About 50 years later, contact lenses became much lighter, like plastic. They were unbreakable, scratch-resistant, but still covered the entire eye.
Then in 1948, an English optician accidentally sanded down a plastic lens and realized something surprising. It stayed in place even when it only covered the cornea. That was a game changer. Now imagine you're living in 19th century London, and you need to send a message to New York. It would have taken about 10 days by ship, so when delivery time dropped from days to hours in 1858, it was revolutionary.
Queen Victoria herself sent the first message made possible by the transatlantic telegraph cable that ran under the ocean. Unfortunately, the cable only worked for a few weeks before failing. It took years to bring it back to life.
And then there's this chilling discovery from Egypt a few years ago. 16 human hands, carefully buried in 4 strange pits. At first, they didn't even look human. They were unusually large.
But here's the creepy part. They were all right hands. No left hands anywhere. Turns out this lines up with an ancient ritual. Old Egyptian art and texts talk about a ceremony where warriors would cut off their enemies' right hands and present them as proof of victory, asking for gold in return. Egyptians believed in the afterlife, so cutting off a hand wasn't just physical. It symbolically took away someone's power forever.
It's thought that this particular event involved a battle between Egyptians and the Hyksos, a people who lived in what was once called Canaan. Egypt has always been a hotbed for world-changing discoveries. And get this, back in 2008, archaeologists uncovered a long-lost pyramid.
Sadly, it's basically vanished now, deteriorated over 4,000 years. Today, all that's left is the base. But in its prime, the site was a big deal. Nearby, the ancient Egyptians held a special kind of ritual. High priests would carry mummified remains of sacred bulls. They believed these bulls, called Apis bulls, were physical forms of the god of Memphis and linked to fertility rites. But it wasn't just any bull. It had to be entirely black, with a single white mark between its horns and a bunch of other very specific traits. Once chosen by local priests, the bull was worshipped, and when it died, it was mummified and buried in underground galleries.
Back to that lost pyramid, it vanished from sight around 1800. A German archaeologist was the first to discover it in the village of Saqqara, and originally called it the Headless Pyramid. Years later, desert sands buried it again. There were a few digs during the 19th and early 20th centuries, but nothing thorough. So when archaeologists recently removed a 25-foot tall pile of sand and uncovered a fully intact base, it was a big win. Meanwhile, American archaeologists working in Egypt are excavating what may be the largest ancient burial site ever found, possibly containing over 1 million mummified bodies.
So far, they've uncovered around 1,700 mummies. Unlike the classic royal mummies we often hear about, these individuals weren't kings or queens. They were ordinary people, but still carefully buried and preserved, showing how wide-reaching and deep Egypt's burial practices really were. So, here's something wild. The pharaohs might have actually been regular folks who lived about 1,500 years ago, back when Egypt was under Roman and Byzantine rule. Pretty cool, right? Even the name of one of the tombs is amazing, Buffalo Way. Look it up next time you're planning a trip.
Besides bulls and buffalo, the ancient Egyptians had a soft spot for baboons too. See a pattern here?
In the early 1900s, archaeologists discovered a site full of mummified baboons in a place called the Valley of the Monkeys. And look, no animal got mummified unless it meant something important. Some animals were sacred because they were linked to specific gods. For example, jackals were connected to Anubis, the god of the afterlife. Cats? They were seen as representations of a powerful goddess. As for baboons, they were thought to be tied to Thoth, the god of wisdom and advisor to Ra, one of the top gods in Egyptian mythology. But here's the sad part. Archaeologists believe these baboons were kept indoors, away from sunlight most of their lives. They had severe vitamin D deficiency and were poorly fed. Maybe Thoth wasn't too happy about how his sacred animals were treated, just a theory. And it's never boring for archaeologists in Egypt. They even found human mummies with golden tongues.
Egyptians believed that after death, a golden tongue could help a person speak in the afterlife. Sure, it's a long shot, but hey, why not?
Some of those mummies were buried in wooden coffins, along with cool stuff like necklaces, lotus-shaped gold trinkets, scarab beetles, and iPhones.
Okay, kidding about the iPhones.
Speaking of discoveries, a new temple was recently found in Egypt.
Researchers think it was dedicated to a hybrid god, a mix of the Greek god Zeus and Mount Cassius.
During excavations in the Sinai Peninsula, archaeologists found two pink granite pillars rising out of the ground.
They believe these were the front gate of the temple, which likely collapsed in an earthquake centuries ago.
And talking about gods, get this: scientists recently found a gold ring in a city south of Cairo.
No, it's not magical, just an ordinary gold ring, but it has the image of Bees, the god of joy and fun.
He's usually shown as a happy, chubby little dwarf. Nowadays, tattoos often don't mean much, just something trendy. But in ancient Egypt, women got tattoos for protection during childbirth. At least, that's what scientists think. In the Nile region, one researcher found mummies with preserved tattoos, which is super rare because skin usually decomposes fast. Two of the women had tattoos on their lower backs, simple designs, including that same jolly little dwarf god, Bees. He was also believed to be a protector of women during labor. Now, you're not going to believe this, but... Did the ancient Egyptians invent robots? Well, not exactly, but hear me out. They were astronomers, mathematicians, engineers, and apparently a little eccentric too. There's a wooden statue in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York that sat unnoticed for years, until an X-ray specialist scanned it and found a mechanical system inside. Turns out there's a pulley mechanism running from its shoulder to its leg. When the system moves, the statue actually raises and lowers its hand like it's saying, "Pick me, pick me!" Back to pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built as the final resting place for the pharaoh Khufu. According to legend, when Napoleon Bonaparte entered the Great Pyramid, he came out looking totally shaken and pale. He never told anyone what he saw, but whatever it was, it apparently haunted him for life. To reach the king's chamber, Napoleon would have walked through a very tight ascending passage, then into the Grand Gallery, which is long and narrow. Finally, he'd arrive in the king's chamber, lined with massive blocks of granite. But here's the surprise: it's not as majestic as you might think. There are no hieroglyphs on the walls. The Egyptians only started decorating pyramid interiors much later. Still, the pharaoh's burial chamber would have once been filled with incredible treasures. Gold, jewelry, priceless artifacts, but it was all looted long ago. Whatever remained, it's probably gone by now.
Subscribe to uncover more forgotten history with us. Like, comment, and support our journey to reveal the truth behind ancient mysteries. See you on your next adventure.